My name is Caleb, and for the last 2 years I've been a professional ghost. Not the spooky kind, but the kind that haunts the hallways of corporate America, a phantom of mediocrity in a world that worships disruption. If you've ever had a job you hated, a boss who made your skin crawl, or a dream you had to build in the shadows, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Stick around, because this isn't just a story about getting even. It's a story about what happens when they finally see the ghost they tried to ignore. And if you've ever felt invisible at work, hit that subscribe button because you're going to want to see how this ends. The whole thing started, as most corporate disasters do, with a lie. Not a big dramatic lie, but a small insidious one, coiled around a core of truth. For a living I play dumb. I'm a coder, and a damn good one, but you'd never know it from my performance reviews. My manager, Jenna, is a walking, talking LinkedIn profile, a woman who collects business buzzwords like they're Pokemon and thinks leadership is about having the loudest voice in the room. She's not a leader, she's a parrot with a thesaurus and a title. To her, a good employee was a mirror, someone who reflected her own supposed brilliance back at her. A complex idea from a subordinate wasn't an opportunity, it was a threat, so I adapted. I survived. I became her most mediocre employee. I'd write clunky but functional code, exactly to her bafflingly inefficient specifications. I'd ask questions in meetings that I already knew the answers to, just to give her the chance to enlighten me. I was a blank canvas on which she could paint her masterpiece of self-perceived genius. While she was busy correcting my work, changing variable names for aesthetic reasons or adding useless comments to improve clarity, I was living a double life. At 5 o'clock, I'd clock out, give her a vacant smile, and head home. And there, in the quiet hum of my own servers, I was building a ghost of a different kind, an application. A brilliant, revolutionary application, built on the very technology she had personally and publicly declared a dead end. Next week is our company's annual innovation fair, a corporate dog and pony show where we're all supposed to pretend we're changing the world between mandatory HR seminars. My application, my secret, is my entry. But the presentation won't just be a demo, it will feature a single final slide. A slide that will burn Jenna's carefully constructed empire to the ground. It's titled, simply, Acknowledgements. And beneath it is a list of her directives, her guidance, her visionary pronouncements that had I followed them, would have made my project impossible. It's a thank you note that doubles as a confession, hers, not mine. It will prove to the entire company, to the executives she's spent years trying to impress, that she's not a visionary, she's not even a manager. She's an obstacle. And I'm the ghost who's about to walk right through her. The moment it all crystallized, the precise second the character I was playing became my armor instead of my prison, was on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were Jenna's favorite day for ideation sessions, which was her term for a 2-hour meeting where she would talk at us while we slowly died inside. The air in conference room 3B was always the same, stale, chilled to a morgue-like temperature, and thick with the scent of burnt coffee and quiet desperation. We were all there, my team of 5 coders, sitting around a ridiculously oversized mahogany table that the company had probably spent more on than our entire department's annual training budget. Jenna stood at the head of the table, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation she'd clearly downloaded from some generic business strategy website. The slide on the screen had a single word in a font usually reserved for movie posters, about the apocalypse. Synergy. She tapped the screen with a manicured finger. This, people, is what we're lacking. We have the assets, we have the data, but we don't have synergy. Our client-facing dashboards are stale. Our back-end analytics are a black box. The VPs want a unified data narrative. They want to see the whole chessboard, not just the pawns. I almost snorted. The VPs probably couldn't find the chessboard with a map and a flashlight, but that was beside the point. Jenna was on a roll, so she continued, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper she probably thought sounded like Steve Jobs. What's the play? How do we innovate? How do we break the paradigm? Silence. We all knew the game. The first person to offer a real complex idea would be shot down for not thinking at a strategic level. The goal was to offer something so bland and obvious that Jenna could refine it into her own idea. But that day, I was tired. The facade was heavy. I had been up until 3 a.m. the night before, working on my secret project, and the spark of it was still burning in my mind. So I broke my own rule. I spoke up. What about Axiom? I said. My voice sounded rusty from disuse. Jenna's eyes, which had been gazing wistfully at her own reflection in the darkened screen of the monitor, snapped to me. A flicker of annoyance. What about it, Caleb? Axiom was our company's dirty little secret. It was an in-house data synthesis framework built about a decade ago by a team of certified geniuses who had long since departed for saner, more lucrative pastures. It was powerful, almost obscenely so. It could ingest petabytes of unstructured data from dozens of disparate sources, sales figures, support tickets, market trends, social media sentiment, and weave them into a coherent, predictive model. It was also notoriously difficult to use. Its documentation was sparse, its learning curve was a vertical cliff, and it required a completely different way of thinking about data architecture. Most of the current tech leadership, including Jenna, viewed it as a relic, a piece of legacy junk, cluttering up the servers. Well, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, deferential. It's designed for exactly this kind of problem. A unified narrative. It can bridge the back end and the front end in real time. If we could build a modern interface on top of it, we could give the VPs their chessboard, we could give them the whole stadium. A few of the other coders shifted in their seats. I saw a glimmer of interest in the eyes of Mark, a junior dev who was still too young and hopeful to have had his soul completely crushed. Jenna smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator placating its prey before the strike. Caleb, she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. I appreciate you thinking outside the box. I really do. It shows initiative. She paused for effect, letting the insult hang in the air. But we need to be forward-thinking. Axiom is a digital graveyard. It's a dead end. We invested in that platform, and it yielded no return. Pouring more resources into it would be, to use a technical term, stupid. The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. She had called my idea stupid in front of my peers. It wasn't the first time she'd been dismissive, but this was different. This was a public execution of an idea, not just for the sake of her ego, but because she genuinely didn't understand the technology she was paid to manage. She was a captain sinking her own ship because she was afraid of the engine room. She then turned her back on me, literally and metaphorically. Now a real forward-thinking solution would be to leverage a third-party cloud service. I've been in talks with a vendor called Synergy Cloud. Very promising. They're the market leader in paradigm-shifting, holistic data solutions. Of course she had. Synergy Cloud was expensive, it was bloated, and it would lock us into a multi-year contract that would make our technical debt skyrocket. But it came with a fancy sales team that would take Jenna out to expensive lunches and tell her how brilliant she was. It was a solution for her ego, not for our company. That was it. That was the moment. I sat back in my chair and felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger, the frustration, it all just evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, clear certainty. She had given me the final piece of the puzzle. She had not only dismissed the key to solving our biggest problem, but she had forbidden anyone from touching it. She had handed me the perfect cover. She had drawn a line in the sand and declared one side a dead end, leaving me completely alone on the other side, where the real treasure was buried. I looked at her, standing there basking in the glow of her own imagined brilliance, and I made a vow. I would build it. I would use her digital graveyard to build a cathedral. And when I was done, I would make sure everyone knew that her vision wasn't just blind, it was actively, willfully, destructively wrong. The war was over. The insurgency had begun. I would play the fool for her in the light of day, but in the dark, I would become the architect of her obsolescence. And the best part, she would never ever see it coming. The drive home that evening felt different. Usually, I'd leave the office with a low-grade hum of frustration buzzing under my skin, a residue of the day's compromises and indignities. I'd decompress by listening to a podcast or just driving in silence, letting the character of mediocre Caleb slow off me mile by mile. But that night, the car was silent, and the hum was gone. In its place was a feeling I hadn't had in years. Purpose. It felt like a cold, clean engine turning over in my chest. I pulled into my garage, the door rumbling shut behind me, sealing me in my own world. My home office isn't much, just a converted spare bedroom, but it's my sanctuary. 2 large monitors, a mechanical keyboard that clicks with a satisfying heft, and a server rack humming quietly in the corner, its blue and green lights blinking like a tiny, sleeping city. This was the real office. The place where real work got done. I didn't even take my coat off. I sat down in my chair, the leather sighing under my weight, and I just stared at the blank screens for a long time. The weight of the last 2 years settled on me, not as a burden, but as a history. I saw it all spooling out behind me, a timeline of 1,000 tiny cuts. I remembered my first week on Jenna's team. I'd come from another department, a skunkworks R&D group that had been restructured out of existence. I was known as a problem solver, a guy who could make legacy systems sing. On my third day, I found a critical inefficiency in our data caching process. It was a simple logic error, but it was costing the company thousands of dollars a day in wasted processing cycles. I spent a night rewriting the module, tested it, and deployed the fix. The next morning, the system performance charts shot up. I sent a brief factual email to Jenna explaining what I'd done. Her reply? An all-hands email to the entire department. Team, I'm thrilled to announce that after some strategic analysis on my part, I was able to identify and resolve a key performance bottleneck. A great win for us all. There was no mention of my name. When I saw her in the hall, she just gave me a tight smile and said, "Good work keeping up, Caleb." Then there was the Franklin account incident. Franklin Mutual was our biggest client, a fintech giant whose contract was worth 8 figures annually. Their system was built on a patchwork of ancient code I had helped write years ago. They had a catastrophic failure on a Sunday morning. The on-call support team was lost. Panic set in. Jenna, of course, was unreachable. She was at a wellness retreat, with no cell service. I got the call from a frantic director. I spent the next 14 hours, without a break, diving into the guts of the system, patching code on a live server, and coordinating with Franklin's tech team. I got them back online at 3 a.m. on Monday. At the 9 a.m. post-mortem meeting, Jenna, looking refreshed and tan, strode in and took over. As I was remotely monitoring the situation, she began, a bald-faced lie. I guided the team through my established disaster recovery protocols. She got a commendation from the CEO. I got a thank you email from the director, with Jenna CC'd, which she never acknowledged. These weren't just slights, they were lessons. Jenna didn't want a competent subordinate, she wanted a scapegoat for failures and a ghostwriter for successes. Every time I showed initiative, I was punished with either erasure or condescension. And so, I learned. I built the persona of mediocre Caleb as a shield. My code became just good enough. My suggestions became bland. My enthusiasm vanished. I became gray, invisible. It was a full-time job playing a role, and frankly, it was more exhausting than the coding itself. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. Or, in my case, until you hide it so well that everyone forgets it's there. I remembered Arthur Kowalski. He was the lead architect who had been the heart of Axiom's original design team. He was in his late 50s, a quiet man with kind eyes and a brain that moved at the speed of light. He saw Jenna for what she was from the day she arrived. He tried to mentor her, to explain the deep architecture of our systems. She treated him like a doddering old relic. "Thanks for the history lesson, Arthur," she'd say, cutting him off mid-sentence, "but we're talking about the future now." The final straw for Arthur was when Jenna approved a budget to replace a core module he had built with an off-the-shelf solution that was objectively worse in every way. It was less secure, less efficient, and less scalable. But the company that sold it had a slick sales deck and promised seamless integration, a phrase Jenna loved. Arthur fought it. He showed her the data, the performance benchmarks, the security audits. She told him he was being resistant to change. The day the purchase order went through, Arthur walked into my cubicle. He looked tired, older than his years. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Caleb," he said, his voice low, "don't let her hollow you out. There's a difference between a ladder and a cage. Make sure you know which one you're in." The next day, he resigned. No fanfare, no exit interview. He just vanished. I heard later he'd taken an early retirement, moved to a cabin in the mountains. He was one of the geniuses the company had let walk out the door, and Jenna had held the door open for him. Thinking of Arthur now, in my quiet office, I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't fought for him. I had kept my head down, playing my part. But his words came back to me. "Don't let her hollow you out." And I realized, with a jolt, that this project, this secret rebellion, wasn't just about revenge on Jenna. It was about honoring Arthur. It was about proving that his work, his genius, wasn't a digital graveyard. It was a sleeping giant. And that was the catalyst. It wasn't just one thing. It was the death by 1,000 cuts. It was the stolen credit, the condescension, the memory of good people like Arthur being driven out. Jenna's speech in the conference room wasn't the cause, it was just the starting gun. She had handed me the motive, the means and the opportunity, all wrapped in a bow of corporate arrogance. I finally took off my coat and draped it over the back of my chair. I cracked my knuckles, the sound echoing in the silent room. I pulled up a new project directory on my main monitor. I typed in the name, Nexus, a connection, a link. The thing that would bridge the gap she said couldn't be bridged. I then opened a secure encrypted messaging app on my second monitor. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't used in months. Kowalski, Arthur. I hesitated for a moment. Was it fair to drag him back into this mess? But his words echoed in my head. He wasn't just a former colleague, he was the keeper of the institutional knowledge Jenna had tried to bury. I typed a simple message. Arthur, it's Caleb. I have a question about Axiom, specifically about the undocumented kernel hooks for real-time data streaming. You once said they were the key to everything. Are you free to talk? I hit send, my heart pounding a little. I didn't expect an immediate reply. For all I knew, he was off the grid, fishing in some mountain stream, happy to have left the corporate world behind. But as I turned my attention back to the first lines of code for Nexus, a notification popped up. A single word from Arthur, finally. A slow grin spread across my face. This wasn't just my project anymore. It was an echo of the past, a promise for the future. Jenna thought she was in control, that she was shaping the narrative. But the real story was being written in the dark, in the quiet places she refused to look. And I, the mediocre ghost, was holding the pen. The fallout was over. The resolve had hardened into steel. It was time to build. The next 6 months were a study in compartmentalization. My life split into 2 distinct parallel streams. From 9 to 5, I was Day Caleb, Jenna's loyal, slightly dim-witted coder. I'd attend her pointless meetings, nodding thoughtfully as she explained why we needed to circle back and touch base to synergize our deliverables. I'd take on the grunt work she assigned, the boring, thankless tasks of maintaining the very Synergy cloud platform she'd championed. I'd deliberately inject small, easily fixable inefficiencies into my code, creating just enough work for her to discover and optimize, feeding her god complex, like a zookeeper, tossing a fish to a particularly loud sea lion. It was a performance, and I became a master of the craft. Playing dumb is a full-time job, but the payoff, I suspected, would be astronomical. Then, at 5 o'clock, I'd go home, and Night Caleb would emerge. Night Caleb was a man possessed. Fueled by cold brew coffee, I steeped myself in meticulous 24-hour cycles. I'd descend into my basement office, the hum of the servers a welcome symphony after a day of corporate noise. This is where Nexus came to life, line by line, module by module. My conversation with Arthur had opened the floodgates. He wasn't just willing to talk, he was an eager co-conspirator. He had kept all of his old notes, his design documents, his personal backups of the Axiom source code from before the company, streamlined the official repositories, deleting gigabytes of vital comments and history. Our first video call was a revelation. He was bearded now, sitting in a rustic-looking room with a stone fireplace behind him. He looked healthier, happier. Caleb, he'd said, a twinkle in his eye. Jenna's mistake is the classic MBA mistake. She looks at a tool like Axiom and sees a line item on a budget, an asset to be depreciated. She doesn't see that it's not a tool, it's a language. She's trying to write a novel using a restaurant menu. He was right. Axiom wasn't a simple program you ran. It was an environment you thought in. Arthur walked me through its hidden architecture, the parts the official documentation never mentioned. He explained the kernel hooks, the undocumented APIs that allowed for direct memory access and data manipulation at speeds our current systems couldn't even dream of. This was the genius of Axiom. It didn't just query data, it absorbed it, lived in it, creating a dynamic self-organizing neural network of the company's entire information ecosystem. They never got it, Arthur lamented, shaking his head. They wanted to put a pretty web interface on it and sell it as a product. That's like putting a saddle on a hurricane. You don't ride it. You learn to predict its path and harness the power. That became my mission to build the weather station for the hurricane. Nexus wouldn't be a replacement for Axiom, it would be its interpreter. A clean, intuitive, beautiful front end that could speak Axiom's language and translate its ferocious power into something a normal human, even a vice president, could understand. It would have drag and drop query builders, real-time visualizations that bloomed and shifted as new data flowed in, and a predictive analytics module that could forecast sales trends with terrifying accuracy. It was everything Jenna claimed she wanted, built on the one thing she swore was worthless. Building it was a tightrope walk. I was using the company's tech, but I was doing it on my own time, on my own hardware. The legalities were fuzzy. This was part of my calculated risk. According to our employee handbook, any work-related inventions created using company resources belonged to the company. But Jenna had created a beautiful loophole for me. She had, in writing, in multiple emails and meeting minutes, declared Axiom to be a non-viable, unsupported legacy asset. She had officially disowned it. My argument, if it ever came to it, would be that I was engaging in a personal R&D project on a defunct technology, akin to a hobby. The fact that this hobby could save the company millions was a fortunate coincidence. To pull it off, I needed more than just Arthur's old notes. I needed live data. And that's where my second, unwitting ally came in, Maya. Maya Rodriguez worked in the marketing department. She was sharp, ambitious, and sat in a cubicle close enough to Jenna's office to overhear her daily tirades. More importantly, she hated Jenna with the quiet, simmering passion of 1,000 thwarted good ideas. Jenna treated the marketing team like her personal art department, demanding they change campaign logos based on her feng shui and rewrite copy to include more buzzwords. I started small. I'd catch her in the break room. "Hey Maya," I'd say, affecting my usual dopey demeanor. "Jenna's got me doing this weird competitor analysis on Synergy Cloud, and I'm totally lost. Do you have any of the raw market data reports from last quarter? The ones with the customer segmentation? I'm supposed to be looking for synergistic opportunities." Maya would give me a knowing look. She was smart. She knew the project was busy work, and she probably suspected I was up to something, but she also knew that helping me was a tiny act of rebellion against Jenna. "Sure, Caleb," she'd say with a saccharine smile. "Anything to help with Jenna's strategic vision. I'll email you a link to the archive." Those archives were gold. Raw, unfiltered customer feedback, sales data, market projections. I set up a script to pipe it all from my work machine through a secure tunnel to my home server, where Axiom, my sleeping giant, was waiting to be fed. Every night it would chew through the day's new data, learning, growing, its predictive models becoming more refined. The hardest part was maintaining the facade. There were days I'd solve a complex problem in Nexus at 2 a.m., feeling like a god, only to go into work and have to pretend I couldn't figure out a simple SQL query. "Gosh, Jenna," I'd say, scratching my head. "I'm just not seeing it. The logic is so tricky." She'd lean over my shoulder, her perfume suffocating me, and point. No, Caleb. You're thinking in loops. You need to think in streams. See, like this." She'd type for a minute, changing my perfectly functional code into her own convoluted mess, and then sit back, triumphant. "It's about having the vision to see the data flow." I'd nod. "Wow, thanks, Jenna. I never would have gotten there." Inside, I was screaming, but I held it in. Every condescending remark, every stolen moment of credit was another log on the fire. It was fuel. It kept me going through the bleary-eyed nights and the soul-crushing days. One night, I hit a major breakthrough. I was trying to get Nexus to visualize supply chain data against customer satisfaction metrics, a notoriously difficult task. The data sets were structured completely differently. It was apples and asteroids. I was stuck. I sent a desperate message to Arthur. His reply came an hour later. "Stop thinking about the data. Think about the relationships." Axiom has a deprecated function, relational mapping. It was designed to find non-obvious correlations. Jenna's people probably thought it was a bug and disabled it. Check the source for a commented out block around line 88,000. The activation key is Prometheus. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the ancient source code, and there it was. A huge block of pristine, elegant code, wrapped in comment tags. At the top, a single line from the original developer, //. "The gods may not like it when you bring them fire." I uncommented the block, recompiled the kernel, and fed it the activation key. Prometheus. The fans on my server rack spun up with a roar. The monitor flickered as Axiom's core processes reconfigured themselves. And then on my screen, the data began to move. It wasn't a chart or a graph. It was a living constellation. The supply chain data formed a swirling galaxy, and the customer satisfaction metrics appeared as pulsing stars within it. And connecting them were faint, glowing lines, threads of correlation that no human would have ever spotted. I could see, clear as day, how a shipping delay in a warehouse in Ohio was causing negative sentiment on Twitter in California 3 weeks later. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And it was mine. That was the moment I knew I had it. This wasn't just an app. It was a new reality. It was a tool that could give our company an almost precognitive ability to understand its own business. A vision without execution is just hallucination. Jenna had the hallucinations. I had the execution. Now all that was left was to plan the reveal. The innovation fair was the perfect stage. It was a company-wide event, with all the VPs and senior leadership in attendance, all of them hungry for a genuine win after a year of Jenna's expensive, fruitless initiatives. I submitted my entry form under the most boring title I could conceive: Legacy Data Integration Framework, a case study. I knew Jenna would have to sign off on all entries from her department. When she saw mine, she just laughed. "Oh, this is cute, Caleb," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "Giving yourself a little side project. Sure, whatever. Just make sure your main deliverables for the Synergy cloud migration don't slip." She signed the form with a flourish, a queen, granting a court jester a minor indulgence, never once suspecting that she was signing her own death warrant. The secret plan was complete. All the pieces were in place. The trap was set. The week before the innovation fair felt like the final, deceptive calm before a storm. The office buzzed with a nervous, artificial energy. Teams were scrambling to put the finishing touches on their presentations, printing oversized posters, and rehearsing their spiels. Jenna was in her element, flitting between her favorite employees, offering unsolicited advice, and tweaking their PowerPoint slides to add more of her signature, meaningless jargon. She completely ignored me, which was the greatest gift she could have possibly given me. My project, Legacy Data Integration Framework, a case study, was so profoundly boring on paper that it existed beneath her notice. She had already written it off as a pathetic little hobby, a testament to my mediocrity. My days were a masterclass in feigned incompetence. On Wednesday, I accidentally crashed the staging server for the Synergy Cloud platform. It was a simple fix, a matter of clearing a log file, but I let it simmer for 3 hours. I walked into Jenna's office, my face a mask of panicked confusion. "Jenna, I'm so sorry," I stammered, holding up my hands in a gesture of helplessness. "I think I broke something. The whole system is down. I've been trying everything, I just can't figure it out." Her eyes lit up. She lived for moments like this. It was a chance to swoop in, play the hero, and reinforce her narrative of being the sole bastion of competence in a sea of ineptitude. She strode out to my desk, a crowd of anxious junior developers parting before her like the Red Sea. She spent 10 minutes clicking around, sighing dramatically, before discovering the bloated log file. Caleb, she said, shaking her head with a theatrical sigh. "It's about proactive monitoring. You can't just let the system run wild. You have to anticipate the bottlenecks." She typed a single command and the server hummed back to life. She turned to the assembled team. "See, it's not about just writing code. It's about a holistic understanding of the ecosystem." She walked away, basking in the glow of her minor, manufactured triumph. I just nodded, my eyes wide with fake admiration. "Wow, Jenna, thanks." What she didn't know was that while she was busy fixing my deliberate mistake, I had used the server downtime as cover to run my final massive data sync to Nexus. Her grandstanding had given me the perfect window to upload a full year's worth of financials from the accounting department's secure servers, data that Maya had accidentally left in a shared folder we both had access to. My nights were the polar opposite. The moment I got home, the mask came off. My office was a war room. Arthur and I were on constant calls, running final simulations and hardening the Nexus interface. He was my quality assurance, my mentor, my ghost in the machine. "The VPs won't care about the code, Caleb. He advised me one night, his face pixelated on my screen. They're animals. They care about two things, strength and weakness. You need to show them strength. Don't just show them data, show them what the data means. Show them lost money you can find. Show them risks they didn't know they were taking. He was right. A demo wasn't enough. I needed a story. I spent an entire night crafting the narrative for my presentation. I identified 3 major company-wide problems that Nexus could solve instantly. First, the supply chain inefficiency I'd discovered, which I calculated was costing us close to $2 million a quarter. Second, the disconnect between our marketing spend and actual sales conversions, which showed we were pouring money into campaigns that had zero effect on our key demographics. Third, and this was the kill shot, I found a glaring security vulnerability in the Synergy Cloud platform itself, the very system Jenna had championed. It was leaving our most sensitive client data exposed. The final piece of the plan was the presentation itself. I built the slide deck. It was clean, minimalist, and professional. And at the very end, after the Kuna slide, I created one more, hidden slide. It was titled Acknowledgements. Beneath the title, I created a simple bulleted list. Each bullet point was a direct quote from Jenna. Asterisk. The Axiom framework is a digital graveyard. It's a dead end. Email, date asterisk. We don't solve problems the customer doesn't know they have. Team meeting, date asterisk. A forward-thinking solution means leveraging third-party vendors, not legacy code. Project kickoff, date asterisk. Stop focusing on predictive models and focus on the deliverables in the sprint. Performance review, date. Each quote was a nail. Together they were a coffin. The day of the innovation fair arrived. I put on my best corporate drone outfit, a slightly too large blue button-down shirt and bland charcoal trousers. I looked in the mirror. I was invisible. Perfect. The main hall was a cacophony of nervous energy. Booths were set up everywhere, each one a shrine to some minor corporate achievement. I saw Jenna's team, the Synergy Cloud Crusaders, front and center. They had a massive flashy display with looping videos and a mountain of branded stress balls. Jenna was holding court, laughing loudly with a few directors, pointing at her display with pride. My booth was in the back corner, near the restrooms, a spot reserved for the forgotten and the irrelevant. It was a small table with a single monitor and a laptop. No posters, no stress balls. Just a sign with the project's incredibly dull name. People walked past without a second glance. It was exactly as I'd planned. The presentations were held in an adjacent auditorium. I was scheduled for the last slot of the day, the 4:30 p.m. death slot, when everyone was tired and thinking about happy hour. Again, perfect. As the day wore on, I saw the panic begin to creep in. Not for me, but for them. The Synergy Cloud team's demo hit a snag. The live connection to their platform was slow, buggy. The dashboards were taking minutes to load. I saw Jenna's smile tighten as the junior developer at the keyboard started sweating. She stepped in, trying to explain that it was a network latency issue, but the damage was done. The VPs in the front row were looking at their phones. Finally, it was my turn. The MC called my name, mangling the pronunciation. And now, with a case study on legacy data. It's Caleb. A smattering of polite, weary applause. I walked to the podium. The room was half empty. The important people, however, were still there. The CEO, a stoic man named Mr. Thompson. The CTO, David Harrison, the man Arthur used to report to. A serious engineer who had been sidelined by a wave of new-age business gurus like Jenna. And Jenna herself, sitting in the front row, scrolling through her phone, not even bothering to watch. I took a deep breath. I looked out at the handful of faces. And I began. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice calm and clear. "My name is Caleb. We've been told for years that our company's old data is a liability, a digital graveyard. We've been told that the future is in expensive third-party clouds. Today, I'm here to tell you that's wrong. Our greatest asset isn't in the cloud, it's in our basement." I clicked to the first slide. It was a live, pulsing visualization of the company's entire sales network, rendered in stunning 3D. A low murmur went through the audience. I saw Harrison, the CTO, sit up straight. Jenna, annoyed by the noise, finally looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed in confusion. This wasn't the boring presentation she was expecting. "This is Nexus," I said. "It's not just a dashboard. It's a live, comprehensive view of our entire business ecosystem, built on a technology we already own, the Axiom framework." Jenna's head snapped up. Her eyes widened. I could see the gears turning, the panic starting to bubble behind her carefully constructed facade. She looked from the screen to me and back again, a silent, sputtering question on her lips. For the next 15 minutes, I didn't just present. I took them on a tour of their own company, showing them the secrets it had been hiding in plain sight. I brought up the supply chain visualization. "Right here," I said, pointing with the laser pen to a glowing red line connecting a warehouse in Ohio to our West Coast distribution. "This is a logistics bottleneck that is currently costing this company $1.8 million per quarter." Nexus identified it by correlating shipping manifests with real-time weather data and driver availability, something our current systems can't do. With a simple rerouting, we can eliminate it. By next week, the murmur grew louder. I saw the CFO whispering urgently to the CEO. Next, I showed them the marketing data. "We spent $5 million on the Future Forward campaign last year. According to our own data, which Nexus has cross-referenced with customer social media sentiment, that campaign resulted in a net negative brand perception among our target demographic and a 0.2% conversion rate." I clicked again. Meanwhile, a small organic hashtag, started by a few loyal customers, has a 15% conversion rate. We should be amplifying them, not shouting into the void. The head of marketing looked like he'd been slapped. Then I went for the kill. "Finally, let's talk about security." My voice dropped. "Our company has a promise to our clients to protect their data. The Synergy Cloud platform, which we have been migrating to, has a critical vulnerability. Right now." I typed a command into a terminal window on the screen. A stream of what looked like gibberish flowed down the screen. "This isn't gibberish," I said. "This is a live feed of our top clients' user data. It's accessible to anyone who knows where to look. Nexus detected this vulnerability 3 weeks ago." The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the industrial carpet. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, was staring at the screen, his face pale. Harrison, the CTO, looked like he was going to be physically ill. And Jenna looked like she had seen a ghost. Her ghost, the mediocre, incompetent coder she had dismissed and belittled, was standing on stage, systematically dismantling her entire career with a technology she had declared dead. The silent takeover was complete. The panic wasn't just in her eyes anymore. It was a suffocating cloud that had filled the entire room. Her kingdom, built on buzzwords and bravado, had just been conquered. The silence in the auditorium stretched for what felt like an eternity. It was a heavy, loaded silence, thick with the dawning realization of 100 different executives. I saw the CFO furiously typing on his phone. The head of legal was leaning over and whispering to the CEO, his expression grim. The power in the room had fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. It was no longer centered on the front row where the VPs and directors sat. It was focused right on me, a lowly coder standing at a podium in the 4:30 p.m. death slot. I broke the silence. "Any questions?" For a moment nobody moved. Then a hand shot up. It was Harrison, the CTO. His voice was strained. "Caleb, how did you build this? Axiom's core has been dormant for years. No one on staff has the clearance or the knowledge to do this." Before I could answer, another voice cut through the air, sharp and desperate. "I can answer that." It was Jenna. She was on her feet, her face a mask of plastic composure, but her eyes were frantic. This was it, the desperate counter-manipulation. She was trying to get in front of the narrative, to co-opt my success before the cement could dry. "I'm so incredibly proud of my team," she began, her voice ringing with false bonhomie, as she walked towards the stage. "Caleb, operating under my direct strategic oversight, has been working on this as a skunkworks project. I challenged him to think differently, to leverage our legacy assets in new and innovative ways. What you see here is the result of that vision. It's a testament to our department's culture of disruptive thinking." She was brilliant, in a sociopathic sort of way. In 30 seconds, She had attempted to reframe my secret rebellion as her covert master plan. A few of the less technical executives in the room, the ones who lived and died by buzzwords, were already starting to nod. I could see them thinking, "Ah, yes, a skunkworks project. Very innovative." I let her finish. I gave her just enough rope. I smiled a calm, placid smile, the same vacant smile I had perfected over 2 years of her tyranny. "Jenna, you're absolutely right," I said, my voice dripping with sincerity. "I couldn't have done any of this without your guidance. In fact, your vision was so instrumental to this project that I feel it would be a gross oversight not to acknowledge it properly." Her face flooded with relief. She thought she had won. She thought I was the same old pliable Caleb, ready to hand over the credit. She smiled back, a shark smile. "Well, thank you, Caleb. I appreciate that." "Don't thank me yet," I said, and with a single click of the remote, I advanced to the final hidden slide. The screen behind me changed. The beautiful Nexus interface vanished, replaced by stark white text on a black background. Acknowledgements. A special thanks to the guidance of Jenna Davenport. The room was silent again, but this time it was a confused silence. Jenna's smile faltered, and then I clicked again. The first bullet point appeared. Asterisk directive. The Axiom framework is a digital graveyard. It's a dead end. Do not allocate resources. Email to tech leads, October 17th. A gasp went through the room. I saw Harrison's eyes narrow. Jenna's face went white. I clicked again. Asterisk directive. We don't solve problems. The customer doesn't know they have. Focus on the client's stated needs. Team meeting minutes, November 3rd. This was a direct contradiction to the predictive analytics I had just demonstrated. The head of sales, a man whose bonus depended on those analytics, stared at Jenna with open contempt. I clicked again. Asterisk directive. A forward-thinking solution means leveraging third-party vendors like Synergy Cloud, not wasting time on unsupported legacy code. Project kickoff for Synergy Cloud migration, January 22nd. The $2 million vulnerability I had just exposed was in Synergy Cloud. The CFO looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. I let the slide hang there for a beat, letting the words sink in. Each bullet point was a torpedo that blew a hole in her carefully constructed image. It wasn't just an accusation. It was documented proof, with dates, sourced from her own words. It proved she wasn't a visionary. She was a saboteur. She hadn't secretly guided the project. She had actively, repeatedly tried to kill it. The talent exodus began not with resignations, but with looks. I saw the other engineers in the room, men and women I'd worked with for years, looking from the screen to Jenna and then to me. And in their eyes, I saw it, a mixture of shock, awe, and a dawning, furious respect. They had all been under her thumb. They had all had their ideas dismissed, their work belittled. I hadn't just vindicated myself. I had vindicated all of them. I could see them mentally updating their resumes. Why would any talented engineer stay and work for a manager who was demonstrably, provably, an enemy of innovation? Jenna stood frozen in the aisle, a statue of crumbling arrogance. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely, utterly exposed. The first person to move was the CEO, Mr. Thompson. He stood up, his face like stone, and walked, not to Jenna, but directly to the stage. He ignored the stairs and stepped right up onto the low platform, extending a hand to me. I shook it. His grip was firm. "Mr. Caleb," he said, his voice low, but carrying in the silent room, "I believe you and I, and Mr. Harrison, have a great deal to discuss." Immediately, he turned to the CTO. "David, my office. Now, bring him." Harrison nodded, a flicker of something, relief, triumph, in his eyes. The power shift was complete. It was a public coronation and a public execution, all in one. The king was dead. Long live the ghost. The walk from the auditorium to the executive wing felt like a dream. It was the same beige, soul-crushing hallway I'd walked down 100 times, but now it felt different. People peeked out of their offices as we passed. They weren't looking at the CEO or the CTO. They were looking at me. Their faces held a mixture of awe and fear. I was no longer Caleb, the mediocre coder. I was a myth in the making, the guy who had slain the dragon in front of the entire kingdom. We swept into Mr. Thompson's office. It was large and cornered, with a panoramic view of the city I had never seen before. He didn't ask us to sit. He just walked to his window, looked out for a moment, and then turned to face me. Harrison stood beside me, a silent, solid presence. First, Thompson began, his voice devoid of emotion. On behalf of this company, I want to apologize. What I saw in that room was not just a failure of management. It was a failure of our culture, a culture that would allow someone like you to be so thoroughly undervalued, and someone like her. He trailed off, shaking his head. It's unacceptable. He looked at Harrison. David, what's the status of the Synergy Cloud vulnerability? I've already got my top security team on it. Harrison replied immediately. We're taking the platform offline for a full audit. We'll be migrating our client data back to the old servers by morning. It's going to be a long night. He looked at me. Thanks to Caleb's early warning, we can contain it before it becomes a public breach. He didn't just save us money today. He may have saved the company. Thompson nodded, his eyes fixed on me. Caleb, this Nexus project. It's not a project, it's the future of this company. I'm creating a new division, effective immediately. Let's call it Nexus Labs. It will be an independent R&D group with its own budget, its own staff, and one goal to fully develop and integrate the Nexus platform across our entire enterprise. And you will run it. You will report directly to David, and by extension, to me. You will have whatever resources you need. Name your price. I was stunned. Director of Nexus Labs, a blank check. It was more than I had ever imagined. The vindication was so swift, so absolute, it was almost disorienting. And what about Jenna? I asked, my voice quiet. Thompson's expression hardened. Miss Davenport's employment with this company has been terminated. Effective immediately. Security is escorting her from the building as we speak. We will be conducting a full review of her tenure here. Given the potential damages from the Synergy Cloud contract she championed, our legal team will be very interested in her vendor selection process. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a firing. This was a corporate crucifixion. They were going to go after her, not just for incompetence but for potential malfeasance. She had hitched her wagon to an expensive, insecure platform, likely for the kickbacks and the ego stroking from the sales reps. And it had blown up in her face in the most spectacular way possible. A knock came at the door. Thompson's assistant poked her head in. Sir Arthur Kowalski is on the line for Mr. Harrison. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. He looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. He knew. Put him through to the speaker, he said. Arthur's voice, calm and familiar, filled the office. David, it's Arthur. I heard there was some excitement today. I just wanted to say, if you're planning on dusting off the old Axiom engine, you're going to need a good mechanic. I hear the last one retired to the mountains, but I also hear he's getting a little bored of fishing. Thompson looked from me to Harrison. Who is Arthur Kowalski? He's the man who built Axiom, sir. Harrison said. And he's the best systems architect I have ever known. Jenna Davenport drove him out a year ago. I spoke up. He was my advisor on this project. My mentor. Nexus wouldn't exist without him. Thompson didn't hesitate. David, make him an offer he can't refuse. A senior consultant role for Nexus Labs. Top of the scale. Yes, sir. Harrison said into the phone. Arthur, you still there? Welcome back. The new workplace reality settled in with breathtaking speed. My secret project, born in a basement out of spite and frustration, was now the company's #1 strategic priority. The ghost had become the king. I left the CEO's office an hour later. As I walked back through the now empty hallways, I passed conference room 3B, the sterile room where Jenna had called my idea stupid. The lights were off, the room dark and silent. It looked smaller, less intimidating. Just a room. Her power had never been real. It was an illusion, and I had simply turned on the lights. When I got back to my desk, there was a small crowd waiting. The other engineers from my old team. Mark, the junior dev, stepped forward. Caleb, he said, his voice full of an emotion I couldn't quite place. That was legendary. We're with you. If you're building a team, we want in. One by one, they all nodded. This was the real victory. It wasn't about the money or the title. It was about this. It was about earning the respect of my peers, about creating a space where good people could do good work without fear of a credit-stealing, soul-crushing manager. It was about building something that was not just powerful, but also right. The confrontation was over. The vindication was absolute. The war was won. I sat down at my old desk, in my old chair for the last time. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. They took my laptop. They're talking about lawyers. You did this. You ruined me. It was from Jenna. I looked at the message for a long moment. I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She had built her own prison, brick by brick, with every lie, every stolen idea, every condescending remark. I hadn't ruined her. I had simply held up a mirror, and she had been destroyed by her own reflection. Vision without execution is just hallucination. And her hallucination had finally, spectacularly, come to an end. I deleted the message without replying. I had work to do. So here I am, a few months later. I'm sitting in my new office. It's a corner office, the kind I used to think was reserved for people who were better at politics than at their actual jobs. There's no mahogany table, no motivational posters with meaningless words. There's just a massive whiteboard covered in architectural diagrams, a bank of monitors displaying the beautiful living data of the Nexus system, and the quiet hum of a team of brilliant engineers working just outside my door. Arthur is here, a permanent fixture, looking 10 years younger. Maya is heading up our new internal marketing team, and she's a rock star. We got her access to the real data, and she's working miracles. We're building something incredible. My official title is Director of Nexus Labs, but that's not what I am. I'm a translator. I translate passion into code. I translate data into stories, and most importantly, I translate competence into value. Jenna is gone. I hear rumors. The company's lawyers are in a protracted battle with Synergy Cloud over the fraudulent claims they made during their sales pitch, a pitch Jenna championed. Her name is Mud, not just here, but across the industry. She's a case study now, a cautionary tale whispered about in boardrooms. She tried to build a career on a foundation of stolen credit and fear, and when the first real storm came, the entire structure washed away. Sometimes I think about the man I was for 2 years. Mediocre Caleb. He was my camouflage. He was my shield. He was a strategic creation, born of necessity. But the strange thing is, I learned something from him. He taught me patience. He taught me to observe, to listen, to understand the system from the inside out before trying to change it. He taught me that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Let them think you're a ghost. Because ghosts can walk through walls, ghosts can see the secrets hidden in the dark. And when the time is right, ghosts can remind everyone that they are, and always have been, real. My story isn't really about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. What I did was colder, more calculated. It was about balance. It was about a system correcting itself. Competence isn't cheap, and when a company stops paying for it, it eventually pays a much higher price for its absence. Jenna was that price. I was the receipt. So if you're out there, in a job that's grinding you down, with a boss who's stealing your light, don't just get mad. Don't just quit. Get quiet. Get strategic. Find your own dead-end technology, your own hidden leverage. Build your secret weapon in the dark. Bide your time, and wait for your own innovation fair. Wait for your moment to hold up the mirror, because the world is full of people like Jenna, but it's also full of people like you. People who do the real work, who have the real vision, and sooner or later, the lights always come on. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the ghost in the machine, let me know in the comments below. I read every one of them. Like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and please, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories of corporate justice. Until next time, keep building.